Okay, good morning and welcome, guys. Welcome to the London live session. As always, I am your host and we are going to have a ton of fun. In the next couple of minutes, we're going to cover the news, what is exactly happening in the markets this morning, and what specifically applies to us from a London trading session perspective. All right, so we're going to jump into the news as always, and really it's all about just looking at what's busy happening and making sure that regardless of what trade we're in, we're aware that there can be volatility, there can be a ton of things happening in the markets. Now, first and foremost, the item that I think is going to be of the most importance is going to be the CPI data on ZAR. So as you guys remember, looking at last week, we had that massive move on the US CPI data that rocked the markets, and the expectation or the forecast for the South African CPI, I think we're going to see something here. So without further ado, let's just jump straight in and have a look at the economic calendar and what it is we are going to be looking out for. So that core CPI and CPI is going to be coming out at 10. The forecast seems extremely conservative, right? It seems extremely low. And I think a shock factor to this could definitely send the Rand for a massive buy bias, right? So we're going to definitely pay a bit of attention to that. Later on in the day, we obviously have some US data. And then again, just highlighting the fact that this evening is going to be a massive one. We're focusing on that interest rate decision. Now, if you're joining me, this week, the live broadcasts are free to everybody within the Globex 360 Telegram channel, as well as YouTube. From next week, you will be required to have a live account to gain special access to the live broadcast. This last week is a test, getting your feedback, seeing what it is that you want to see, and obviously just, getting the whole new studio into the flow of things. But from next week, we kick it up a whole new gear, and that is going to be primarily and especially for Globex 360 live account holders. So just a quick shout out to everybody that's joining us. Always, Heinrich, what's happening? Asamale, Nadir, what's happening? Petunia, Lot Vuma, guys, welcome to this morning's broadcast. So without further ado, let's jump in. Let's have a look at what are going to be the assets that we're going to be looking at. And we're going to start off this morning by looking at gold and the structure that gold is currently in and how we can potentially take advantage of that with the London session open. Now, as I explained yesterday, we start to see quite a few different things happening on gold, specifically around this turning point, and we'll also have a look at US 30 because that's going to be our main focus for a turning point. All right, so if we have a look at gold, and what I want to quickly do here is just make sure we have our RSI. And a lot of people ask me on the RSI, what settings am I using? Is there special settings? There is no special settings, right? Basic configuration, the same way it's on your phone, in the same way it's on MetaTrader, is how we will essentially use it. So remember, gold, we're looking for that change in momentum, that change in structure, and we're looking for those changes at around about 8 o'clock in the morning. So this morning's move ended up happening at about 8:30. So, and that was clearly identified, as I showed you guys yesterday, by that RSI. So if anybody caught that break, you would have caught that gold sell for probably about 60 pips or so. So where gold is currently sitting, how do we deal with this and how do we essentially trade this? Well, ultimately, gold has already made quite a substantial push, but we are within market structure, right? Gold is busy ranging. So gold would be an opportunity to buy low and sell high, but I'm not too interested in trading a range. It doesn't interest me too much. For those of you who enjoy the scalping side of things, this may be of interest to you, but please make sure that you're aware of these moves that happen every single day. Looking at exactly 8 o'clock, which is that right there, we can see we had a structure on gold, and then at that 8 o'clock mark, we see that break in structure that ends up happening. So again, a super simple way to just diversify your portfolio and just make sure that start of the day you've got a really good trade in the bank. And ultimately the goal would be, if you've got a trade in the bank, you've got a trade in your back pocket, you've banked some pips, you can reutilize those pips. Instead of risking parts and percentages of your account, you can take realized profits that you've banked, and utilize that to further trades, increasing margin, increasing account size, and there's a bunch of knock-on effects. So even if you like one specific asset, even if you just love, gold or crypto, whatever the case may be, it's super important to be diversified, to look for those trading opportunities that work for you. And gold, like I said, every single day you can have that opportunity to look for that breakout at 8 o'clock, and you can ride that out in most cases all the way to the New York Stock Exchange open. However, we're not here for that. We're here for a live trade, and what we're looking for in this morning is we're going to pay a little bit more attention to US30. So US30 created a really nice little structure. We got a nice little impulse just before 8 o'clock. We got a nice little push down. And in essence, for those of you who are following and just want to have some sort of basic understanding of what to look for in the markets, you can add this on your phone, you can add this on your charts, but go ahead and add yourself a 500 moving average on a 1 minute time frame, right? If you just want to view it on 1 minute, you can remove it from all time frames and just isolate it on 1 minute. So if you go to 5 minutes, it'll disappear, right? But you want a 500 period moving average, for the reason being that this will help you identify when US30 is in a bull bear market. So you can see this morning we had that breakdown to the downside, and now what I'm going to be paying most of my attention to in the course of this morning, and specifically for this session, is I'm looking for that break to the top side. Now, can you see on the RSI, we already have that first indication that momentum had slowed down to the bottom, right? In addition to that, we have divergence. When I say divergence, what am I talking about? So if you have a look here, we've made a low, right? That area over there, we've made a low right there. And on the RSI, that is represented by that little push there. In a normal market with normal momentum, that next low should be a lower low on the RSI. The fact that we're getting lower lows in terms of the price action, but higher lows in the RSI, that is what we refer to as divergence, meaning a change in momentum. So from a structural perspective, it certainly looks like US30 is trending to the downside, but this starts to give us an indication that there's weakness to that downside, and we could potentially observe some sort of reversal. So that gives us an early indication as to what are we looking for. We're looking for a continuation on the downside trade. Well, we may be too late for that because the break already happened at 8 o'clock on the dot, which is slightly earlier than the 9 that we generally expect. And this could be a ton of reasons. This could be due to the fact that we have the interest rate by the European Central Bank that is also due tomorrow. That could be scaring off markets. But ultimately, if the move happens earlier than expected, it is what it is. We allow that to happen. And ultimately, we're looking at what's going to be that next state of markets. So with these higher lows on the RSI, we can very well make a lower low, but still not yet make a lower low on the RSI. So that would then trigger and give me a bit of a sign for either one of two options. Either we can treat this by doing a limit order, so we can place a buy limit at the point at which we bottom out. So in the event that we do make a bottom within this market structure, right, let's say we push down to that level there, we could do a buy limit because we're aware of the fact that there's a slowing momentum towards the downside. Now also just bear in mind, divergence doesn't necessarily mean always there is going to be a reversal. It's just a very high likelihood that we're going to see some sort of change in momentum, and it's just signaling that the market is weaker to the downside. So the RSI is an amazing tool to utilize to make sure that you obviously catch some of these things, and just gives you a little bit more of a technical background over and above price action. The structure is there, we can see it. We'd like to trade that breakout, but ultimately the RSI gives us that little bit of an early indication. So we're going to hold on to this one, and we're essentially just going to watch it for the next couple of minutes, because as you know, as I spoke about yesterday, 9 o'clock signals, we're looking for that break from 9 o'clock, which would also represent on our chart the 10 o'clock candle. Whatever that break ends up being is what we want to potentially follow, and that can run anywhere from 100 pips to 2,000 or 3,000 pips, but it's just a really good opportunity to look for those high volatility, high impact moves that we want to get in there. So all I'm doing now is I'm pretty much setting up alerts above and below price. So on your MetaTrader, if you're trading on a desktop, you're going to right click and you're basically going to set up an alert above, and you're going to set up maybe some alerts down below. Now let's just have a look and just do a quick zoom out just to get some perspective of where we are. Just from a price perspective, let me leave this chart alone. Let me not mess with this one. Let me go to another time frame real quickly. Let's go grab our US30 daily. Okay. So US30 daily is pushing back into that 78.6, right? We spoke about it in this morning's broadcast. If you didn't see that, please go make sure that you've got, or just go rewatch that, even if it's after this particular live session. So we've seen over multiple days, we've pushed into that 78.6 and we've rejected. We've pushed into that 76 and we've rejected. So ultimately, we need to be cognizant of the fact that we could make a push. And if we do reject, that is what we obviously want to capitalize and take advantage of. Now, also bear in mind, today is a little bit of a special day, for the reason being the whole world has their eyes on this interest rate decision for this evening. So market participants may not be as fluid as we generally would like to see, specifically this time in the morning. So you have to take that with a pinch of a little bag of salt, if you will. So what I would then look for on US30 is a push down at the point at which we complete some sort of little structure here on the RSI, like that. I would then consider, in this case, looking for a buy limit in this region, okay? And there is a way that we can potentially look at measuring this, and we can utilize Fibonacci extensions, we can utilize a bunch of different tools, but ultimately, we know that the pullback happens and we get that next impulse. So what we're looking for is essentially the stop of that pullback, and we're going to essentially target one of these zones. So all we're basically doing now is we're going back and we're having a look at where is our next major, right, level of resistance. Where could we expect price to essentially stop out, right? Where could we expect this little bear run to essentially stop out? And those are going to be our two zones right there. Okay, now we're seeing a nice healthy push down to the downside on US30. We're getting that divergence, right, in terms of low lows price action, high lows on the RSI. And so there's two ways of trading this, right? If you're extremely aggressive, if you're more proactive and you don't necessarily like to wait for a ton of confirmations, one might be in a position to say, okay, fine, listen, they'd like to buy this already and potentially look for a breakout. So what I would do in these cases, if I wanted to be a little bit earlier, I would put in a feeler trade, and you guys know this is how I do things. I'll pop in a feeler trade and I'll essentially place my support, my stop loss below the last level of support. So we're currently at support, there's support 1, support 2. So I'm essentially placing my stop loss in a safe zone that if it pushes further out of this market structure, I want to be wrong, and I want to be wrong quickly, right? I don't want to hold onto a massive loss. But in the event we start to see that reversal come in for that 9 o'clock move, then I would obviously want to see that breakout, and I would want to secure profits towards the top side. So already with that, just that little push and pushing back up into structure, we're already in profit. So, one could then go ahead and either hold that position or essentially just trail that in the event we make that push to the top side. So what I'll do here is I'll put in a really, really small trailing. So I'll put in maybe 1,000 points there. There we go. And the second it pushes 1,000 points above my entry, it will essentially take my stop loss to entry. Because I'm taking a risky trade, I'm taking an early trade, I essentially don't want to have all of that risk. So I essentially want to move that then into entry. And that's, part and parcel of the amazing cashback program, right? Because if you've got a trade and you're able to catch it nice and early, you can bank a couple dollars, and in the event that it closes at entry, as it did right now, I've already made money on my cashback, on my e-wallets, on the cashback side of things. So that would be an example of taking an early trade, provided you want to pull the trigger early. But ultimately, for a type of swing or day trade, we would want this breakout to happen. So we will essentially hold on to this live broadcast a little bit longer. I would love to see this thing break out, and for us to be able to utilize the RSI as an early indicator for that breakout towards the top side. I would really, really like that. So we're going to hold on to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some alerts really quickly, and then we're going to read through the comments and just see if we have anything else that is going on here. Darius, what is happening, my brother? Heinrich all the way from Durban, Lotvim all the way from Cape Town, from Boksburg. What is happening? Good morning, good morning, good morning. Alexandra, Gauteng, what is happening? Guys, if there's anything specifically you would like to see, please drop it in the comments. If there's any specific pair you like to see or that you see a lot of movement on, do let me know. We're quickly going to have a look at Euro USD, which just took a massive hit. And this is going to be mostly just due to the fact that, we have these interest rate increases. The dollar on Euro USD, for that to have moved the way it has, right, the dollar index should start to lose a bit of steam. And we really want to pay attention to what the dollar does leading up to this interest rate announcement, because that is when analysts are really going to sink their teeth in and start to give opinions, hopefully informed opinions. Hopefully it's not just, complete speculation, but we really pay a lot of attention to the movements, even if they're small. We pay attention to those movements leading up to those big announcements, because in this particular case, we're seeing the euro buy less and less of the dollar. So actually the dollar is the strong one here. And the euro is weakening against the dollar. So that would be a very interesting observation. If we see the dollar building strength up to that interest rate, that only means that we're going to have an even more volatile outcome, right? If I saw the dollar losing value leading up to that interest rate decision, that would be in line with what I'm expecting. And then we could see a less explosive, 8 p.m. interest rate announcement. But if we see the dollar start to build in value, that could signal something pretty big and pretty bad, obviously also for indices. If we get the interest rate announcement this afternoon and indices start to fall, it more than likely means that the dollar is going to get stronger. However, as I've explained in this morning's broadcast, if you haven't watched it, go and have a look. In most of the cases, we had a 75 basis point increase. We have seen the dollar lose value. We've seen indices rally. So that's going to be something key we want to keep paying attention to. Now, just quickly switching back to gold and making sure that we don't get anything missed here. So exactly the same thing that I was saying a little bit earlier in terms of RSI broke, and then it gives us that opportunity towards the top side. So RSI is an amazing tool to use, whether you're scalping, whether you're day trading, no matter what it is you're doing. But I generally spend a lot of time on the RSI, specifically on the smaller time frames. And a lot of people ask the question and say, well, listen, but then why scalp? The reality is that all big moves, whether it's a swing, whether it's day trade, whether it's a scalp, starts at some point as a breakout. And if you manage that trade correctly, so if you catch a breakout and you manage your risk correctly, you manage your stop loss correctly, a scalp can become a day trade, a scalp can become a swing trade. So ultimately, scalping just means we're looking a lot more at the smaller details. Yes, a little bit more sensitive to volatility and moves, but that's what makes the market. That's what makes the market exciting. That's what makes the market an amazing place to be and participate in, right? So I enjoy that. I enjoy looking at the smaller time frames and having the bigger perspective over what's busy happening in the world at that point in time. So gold already moved out there. So what we will start to do from tomorrow is we will split and only focus on the three pairs, right? So we'll only look at gold, we'll only look at US 30, and we may include something like NASDAQ as well. And we will only look at them and their breakouts, and then we will essentially execute on a live basis. The first couple of shows, I generally like to teach and speak about what is the theory behind why I do what I do, so that when we're trading and it's fairly fast paced, you're not left behind. You're not saying, why is he buying this? Why is he selling this? Because I'm showing you the types of things that I look for. And that's the beauty of G360 TV, right? Is you can subscribe for signal somewhere else. You can pay to be told buy this, sell that. And most of the times you're going to end up blowing your account. But the reality is through G360 TV, not only are you able to see the trades live, but the understanding of why that execution happens, so that you can build your confidence in the market, so that you can build your portfolio and diversify and get involved in assets that you otherwise maybe just weren't familiar with and obviously get involved with. And this doesn't happen anywhere else in the world right now. If you go look anywhere else in the world, look for a live broadcast where someone actually break down why a move might happen, ends up happening, and then takes that and explains that. That's something that we're extremely proud of, and obviously to be able to host that is a blessing. So quickly just having a look at US 30. So there we go. We're starting to get that pop off. And what I'm really looking for here is I want to get that break. So to see that momentum that I was talking about, divergence on the bottom end, we get that reversal of market structure, and we're starting to get that push towards the top side. Now, if we start to break this is where I would love to get in for a long position and then ultimately hold US 30 for the balance of the afternoon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop in a trade there. And in essence, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my stop loss back into structure. Now, why am I putting my stop loss back into structure? Two reasons, right? If this trade goes back into structure, I don't want to be in this trade, right? Meaning the structure is a bear market. The structure is a selling market structure. We are getting divergence to say, hey, this market wants to move up. So if you've entered that trade with me, you're already in profit, right? You're already in profit. So again, I'd like to see a bigger continuation to the top side. But please remember, with any breakout, there's a retest. So when there's a breakout, people often panic and go, I've entered a trade and now it's pulling back. You do want to wait for that retest, right? That's ultimately what you want to wait for. Now, if we have a look at US30 and how she's performing, US30 has already pushed up about 120 pips or so. So same story would apply. If I were to now engage a trailing of 1,000 points here, it would allow this to pull back, right, as an example. But if I have that next push up to the top side, it would then obviously pull my trailing stop with it towards the top side. And that's obviously one of the advantages of trading on a desktop platform. And that's also an advantage of trading on desktop platform, is that you get Guardian Angel attached with that as part of something that only Globex 360 does and nobody else does, right? So that is definitely the way you want to be and the way you want to move forward. Okay, so US30 is in profit. We've got that little pop to the top side. If we can get over this level that kind of sits above us, we technically are through resistance, but I would like to just cover that candle over there. If we can get over that candle in the next 10-20 minutes, then I'm happy to add orders. And then essentially what I'll do is I'll put up some buy stops north of the next resistance levels. So why do we do that? We do that because once we clear a level, right, we get to a level, we pull back. We don't want to buy a trade and then do a pullback. So it gets to a level, pulls back, breaks the level. We want to enter the trade once the level has been broken. So as you can see there, stop loss is being pulled in profit. Beautiful, nice US30 pop over there. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to edit my stop losses on those higher trades. So my stop loss is already in profit on the first trade. And what I want to do is I want to put a stop loss into profit. Let's see here, 30648. Beautiful US30 push. So US30 is currently running about 200 pips in profit right there. And if it continues up, it will obviously activate my buy stops, which essentially once market passes that level, it takes that trade. So if you guys are in US30 with me, then obviously you are having a bit of fun there. And if she pulls back and closes out that trade, it's also perfectly fine. We have buy stops above, banked some profit. Obviously, depending on the type of trade that you're entering, that would obviously depend on your profitability. Now, first and foremost, the other thing you have to understand, you have to know, is that Globex uses one-to-one ratios when it comes to US30. And this is something that no other broker does. So when you look at other brokers, they're running 1 to 100 contracts, right? So when you're entering a 0.01, you're getting very small moves that essentially hammer your account. So if you've got $100 and you're trading a 0.01 somewhere else, US30 just, sneezes and your account's gone. The beauty with a one-to-one contract means that if we open a one lot position, that is the same as opening a 0.01 elsewhere. So meaning if we open a 0.10, it does two things. It allows you to trade with a smaller account, better margin requirements. It costs you less to open up that trade, but you can still open up 100 lots if you wanted to, right? So it gives you that that opportunity to diversify the size of the trade that you want to enter, and just makes it for a great trading experience. So as you can see quickly on US30, we got that pop above. I wanted to put in a trailing stop because I don't want to be caught into a big pullback. So banked maybe 200 pips or so. And essentially what we're doing now is we're waiting for that pullback to finish up. Now, remember I said I need the price to clear this level before we start to look for more buy opportunities. On the RSI is still sitting in a really good position, and you're more than likely going to find we will start to create a new structure on the RSI. Could potentially be, anything along the lines of, we might end up creating something like that as an example, right? And that would essentially signal to us when this little bull market has either run its course or we could get a pullback. So just a small idea of how we would essentially deal with that 9 a.m. move. Again, bearing in mind that today we can see the markets don't have enough volume in them. I think a lot of people are cautious and waiting for that interest rate decision, especially things like US 30, which is the Dow Jones, S&P 500, NASDAQ, German 30. All of these markets are going to be acting with quite a bit of caution, right? At the 8 o'clock bell, we did get a ton of volatility, but in terms of that sustained movements, we're seeing exactly the same thing happen on German 30. Now, the reason why I utilize the RSI so frequently on US 30 is on German 30, it gives us no indication of what the markets want to do, right? The closest indication we had on US 30 could be, and that's a stretch, right? I'm cutting off a bunch of data here. Could be that it says, hey, listen, I want to break at that point. You could interpret it that way. It's just a lot cleaner on the US 30. It gives us an exact moment at which, this market wants to turn. Beautiful, beautiful price action, pop, retest, and then rally. So that's just an example of how we would deal with that. But essentially what we'll do tomorrow is we'll open up 3 things. We'll have 3 charts. We'll only focus on 3 assets for that move as we then look on into the New York Stock Exchange session. But again, looking at gold, exactly the same thing. RSI is a great tool, specifically if you're scalping and you're looking for those breaks in structure. We had 1 opportunity and 2 opportunities this morning from the time of 8:30 to just before 9 o'clock. So gold tends to move a little bit earlier, as we also just saw the US 30 move a little bit earlier, but generally we expect, like I said, that move to happen at 9. So that's what we're going to be focusing on from tomorrow. And remember, at the moment, these sessions are available to everybody that's in within YouTube, within Telegram. Starting from next week, these sessions will only be available if you have a funded live account of more than $100. So you don't want to get left behind. This is the intro phase. This is getting you used to dipping the feet in the water. When it starts to get crazy, you don't want to get left behind, because then it's an issue of we're not sharing, right? And there is a million reasons why you should have your Globex 360 live account verified, funded, and active and ready to get into the market. So we're going to be having a ton of fun. I'm very interested to see what is going to be the results of the New York Stock Exchange Open this afternoon. I think we could see no volume, or we could see a ton of volume. I think it's either going to be day or night. I don't think we're going to see a mediocre New York Stock Exchange Open. Either analysts are convinced over what the next thing's going to be, and we see, big moves where they are predicting what's going to happen, or we're going to see markets completely dormant and docile. But ultimately, what we're looking for is that 8 p.m. interest rate announcement. I'm going to be streaming that live. So I'll be streaming the results live. I'll be streaming Powell's speech live, and we'll have the charts. So it's going to be very cool. I love these streams, especially when it comes to these massive high impact moves. We get to see the markets range thousands of pips, and we're going to have a ton of fun together. So I'm really looking out for that one. But before we get there, we are trading New York Stock Exchange live this afternoon at 3:30. It is going to get serious. We're going to go live at 3:25, giving us 5 minutes for prep, and then we're going to smash the New York Stock Exchange. So if you want to be a part of that, again, make sure you like and subscribe. I will post the link. We will obviously share it on social media, on Facebook. We will put that all over the place for this week. But again, remember, please, early warning, from next week, you do need to have a Globex 360 live account to get access to that link. Okay, other than that, guys, continue to monitor your markets. If you see anything that you're enjoying, or you see anything that's of interest, please do let me know, and we will obviously look at that in future shows. Other than that, I'll see you guys all for the New York Stock Exchange in a couple hours. As always, be safe, trade safe, and remember to do things the Globex 360 way.